Hey YouTube, hypothetical here. Getting back to my response. This is my follow-up. I guess not a response. A follow-up to the video I made. That was an open question for skeptics, atheists, agnostics, etc. I have to say, I'm pleasantly surprised at the responses I've gotten. Both the number and the quality and straightforwardness of many of them. Even got a video response from I'm Jovian. I'll just go through here and read. Dave Jones, BS News, says rationality. Secular astronomer says it is an observable fact that there are many humans that attempt to and often succeed to kill other humans that love them. To hold the position that someone would never do that simply because they love you is observably false. To ignore physical evidence that definitively shows that someone you love tried to kill you would do more than just put you out of touch with reality. It would threaten your life, as it would leave you vulnerable to that loved one's possible second attempt on your life. Secular astronomer, he said also on this. He also says, I think that I would probably be able to maintain my wits enough to accept that someone I love tried to poison me, but no one can say for sure unless it actually happens to them. Unfortunately, many people allow their bias to get the best of them, and they do refuse to accept the reality of the situation. And when that happens, everyone loses, except for the attempted murder. An Angel 13 says, I will second secular astronomer on the basis of everything he said. I'd like to add to that it truly doesn't take a hypothetical extreme of someone you love attempting to kill you. I think I'm fairly safe to assume that everybody can recall moments of disappointment and of disbelief when betrayed, hurt, or deceived by a person you cared for a lot. Angel 13. Arlo Pickens, WTF. RD 1999, truth is truth, truth can be proven. Hopeful 71, given no further information, I side on rationality. I don't live in a world where no one ever lies to people they love in order to protect themselves. We are weak and flawed creatures. We strive to be good, but we fail often. What is the point of this open question? Raoul's dower saves us. I probably just realized that she did it. It would suck, but it would be an unavoidable truth. And how does this really affect skepticism, atheism, agnosticism, etc.? And Magrana, if the conclusion was rational and peer-reviewed, then blank. I'd believe the person tried to kill me, and I'd be pretty pissed about it too. Now, since you posted this to skeptics, then I assume you distrust science and all objective reason, and not accept the truth simply due to your own subjective emotional preference. I'd love to see you to try to spin this to beneficial towards theists, agnostics. And then Jovian places a response along similar lines, and then he asks, what if it was a case of a family member involved in pedophilia? Would you deny that? I have to say, if I caught someone in the act of pedophilia, you obviously couldn't deny that. Anyway, I'll get into this a bit further here, as I promised. I'd like to just I'm going to have an article linked here to a case in which there's a woman who went to the government basically to try to get welfare aid for her children, and as part of the government process they run paternity tests, DNA paternity tests, and paternity tests are pretty, they're solid. I mean, we can all agree on that. I agree on that. As far as the results you get back on DNA, well, it comes back that this woman's DNA does not match her kids. It matches her husband. The kids are her husband's, but they don't match her DNA. And so all of a sudden this woman is suspected by the government of, illegally, mothering these children, and aside from that, possibly, in welfare fraud and everything else. Well, this lady is kind of distraught, and she's, that would kind of freak you out if all of a sudden somebody came and told you these kids aren't yours. And she couldn't get a lawyer to represent her. She went to all these lawyers, nobody would touch it because his DNA was bulletproof. And so she worked up contingency plans with her family to try to hide her kids when the authorities came to get her. Anyway, the story ends up jumping to another woman who needed a transplant. I can't remember what kind exactly, but needed a transplant, so they were testing among her kids to see who would be able to give, who would be a viable donor. And as part of this test, it came back the similar results. All of her kids that tested didn't test as being her own. And every single doctor they took this to, that this was presented to, all of these professionals, scientists, researchers, everybody they took this to, then looked at the case and looked at all the stuff they had, said, this lady has some skeletons in her closet. Well, they were testing everything, every tissue they could think of on her, and they were all coming back that these weren't her kids. Well, finally, she remembers that she had her gallbladder removed. I believe it was her gallbladder. Anyway, they end up finding this in a lab, and in the lab, they find her gallbladder, they take a specimen, they run a DNA test, and the DNA test finally comes back that these are her kids. She is what a very, very rare anomaly that's known as chimera. It's where you get two or more embryos that kind of meld to become one embryo, or where the genetic information for twins, fraternal twins, ends up mixing and becoming one being. So part of your body has one genetic makeup and part of your body has another. Well, this and the other lady that had been seeking government aid and had all these threats of getting her children taken away, she's finally able to find a lawyer, and because of this other case coming to their knowledge, they're able to do this. Now I bring this up because, well, throughout history, even presently, just it's an ongoing fact and reality of science, is that when we arrive at some point, the establishment becomes certain. The peer review on any given number of things becomes certain as to what is this way and what is that way. And so the reason I presented this question is because I have a follow-up question to it. Some of you may not feel it's fair for whatever reason, and I'd be happy to hear whatever you wanted to give that way. But I would point out before you go off and give your critique on my hypothetical, I'd ask you to think about how many times throughout history, look at the history of science, and look at how many times they've been certain of different things within the generation that existed, and it even goes on up to today. I mean, it still goes on. You'll get peer review on some conclusion, and people will be certain that this is the way it is, and because they're certain, because all these things have been peer reviewed, gone through peer review journals, and they think the rational thing is to automatically, that's the ultimate authority, is a peer review journal telling you what is and isn't this way and that way. And this overall trust in the system of the way it's set up presently. So my follow-up question, as I mentioned, I have a follow-up question, is what if you had made that decision, you decided, okay, this relative, friend, confidant, lover, spouse, whoever, you'd come to that conclusion and you decided this person did try to kill me, even though there was no eyewitnesses